Hi, it's Coach Hal. In this series of videos, I've been talking about real estate prospecting reluctance, a learned avoidance behavior that's triggered by an emotional reaction to the thought of initiating or following up on potential sources of business. The failure to generate sufficient business is a major cause of agents dropping out of the industry without ever achieving the goals that they had for themselves and for the ones that they love. Statistics show that the hesitance to prospect and self-promote is one of the most common challenges of being a successful realtor, with as many as 80% of all agents experiencing it at some point in their career. In the first video of the series, I discussed an assessment tool called the SPQ Gold. Created by the Behavioral Science Research Press, this is the world's first and only assessment designed to measure motivational energy and goal orientation. It reveals which or what combination of prospecting reluctance types might be interfering with your ability to find new business. If interested, I can make this assessment available to you. Simply click on the link in the video description below, and we'll schedule a free discovery call to talk about it. In last week's video, I discussed what I call the behavioral decoys, behaviors that on their surface look like prospecting reluctance, but really aren't. And while they lead to the same place, which is not enough business to support your personal and professional goals, they're driven more by a lack of energy, training, or direction created by not having a viable plan to accomplish what you want. And while it's true that if left unaddressed, these can lead to poor results and underperformance, they can generally be eliminated through proper training and coaching. And yet sometimes we know what to do and we know how to do it. We have all the energy and the motivation that we need to take action, and yet we just can't bring ourselves to do it. This is such a common issue for real estate agents. In fact, for anyone who finds themselves in a role that involves selling. And as I've said in the past, there's good news here. Because these behavioral patterns are learned, with the right strategies, they can also be unlearned. While the SPQ Gold identifies 16 different ways that these behaviors can show up in the life of an agent, I want to discuss and really focus on some of the most common ones that I've seen and experienced myself as both a coach and as a real estate broker. I'm going to focus on 9 of the 16 types in this series, 5 today and 4 in the next video. So let's begin with one of the most common issues that I see in the real estate community, which leads to prospecting reluctance. It's called role rejection. Now, this might not be as prevalent in other sales careers, but in real estate, I see it all the time. At its core, it's rejecting the fact that as an agent, you are in a sales position. I think this can be especially common for people like me who transitioned into real estate after having successful careers in other professions. Because this was one that I struggled with at first, I really understand where it comes from. And let's face it, selling is associated with some pretty ugly stereotypes. You know the ones. A pushy and self-serving individual who's got no interest in the needs of the customer at all. Their only concern is to force them to buy, whether it's in their best interest or not. Like so many things, our thoughts shape the way that we feel about something, and how we feel shapes our actions. And in this case, our thoughts about a career in sales tells us that people will look down on us. They'll think that we're in it for the money and not really interested in them at all, or even in being of service. Our feelings are that being in sales somehow degrades us and makes us into someone that we don't want to be. We'll lose the respect of the people whose opinion matters most to us. Our actions are to try to avoid being seen as that guy. So we reframe our role as consultants, educators, maybe even guides. And while all of those are important elements of what we do in the sales process, they don't define the primary role of a salesperson. And what's that? Well, to me, selling is nothing more than guiding people through a process of self-discovery where the client becomes empowered to make a decision that is in their own best interest and then take action on that decision with more confidence than they would have had if there was not a salesperson involved. In short, we facilitate decision-making and action. An educator or a consultant, while interested, has far less personal investment in the action of the student or the client. They get paid whether the student does anything with their newfound knowledge or not. And that's one of the primary differences in professional real estate sales. Typically, we only get paid when the transaction is completed and the client's problem is solved. Sometimes we need to tell ourselves over and over until we finally believe it that there's absolutely nothing wrong with being paid to solve people's problems. It's what your doctor does, it's what your lawyer does, it's even what your plumber or your babysitter does. When we redefine our definition of being a salesperson, we no longer need to reject it. And when we fully embrace our identity as a problem solver, it becomes much easier to look for people who have the kinds of problems that we're uniquely qualified to solve. Another common type of prospecting reluctance also stems from what we're telling ourselves, and it's a type that we call the yielder. And as the name suggests, a yielder is someone who yields or habitually gives way to others. So what does that look like in real estate? Well, it's the person who recognizes that they're in sales, yet feels like it's impolite to interrupt or intrude. Much of this can be influenced by old scripts and outdated beliefs rattling around in our heads about what it means to be polite and appropriate when interacting with others. There can be significant gender and cultural overtones to these messages as well. Always looking to minimize the chance for conflict, the yielder constantly looks for just the right time to initiate the sales conversation, or risk being seen as rude and losing the respect and approval of the people around them. Prospecting is the act of proactively searching for problems that we can solve. It's a very active and deliberate process, like an old-time gold prospector sitting alongside the side of a stream, pulling up pans filled with mud and pebbles, searching for that one nugget of gold. When we prospect, we're going to get our hands dirty. And for the yielder, the thought of initiating this kind of action feels so uncomfortable and challenges our identity so severely that they simply won't do it. They do spend an enormous amount of time, on the other hand, building relationships, both in person and on social media. And while their networks may be strong, they never initiate the sales conversation. I've had yielders tell me that they were shocked and even angry when people told them that they forgot that they were still in sales. When was the last time that you told them, I ask? Invariably, it had been way too long. Building a strong community is, in my mind, the most critical aspect of forging a successful career as a real estate agent. So this is a big one. If we're operating from the position of the yielder, we absolutely must rewrite the stories we're telling ourselves about what appropriate behavior looks like. We must learn to be comfortable enough in initiating sales conversations so that we don't miss the opportunities that are all around us. Two more types of prospecting reluctance have to do with who we're willing to prospect to and who we're not. Friendshield is the belief that it's inappropriate to prospect to friends for fear that they'll think we're exploiting their friendship. Similarly, Famshield is the reluctance to prospect to family members out of the fear that they'll look down on us, seeing us as desperate and in need of their help. Many who struggle with these reluctance types are perfectly comfortable prospecting to others, but the thought of prospecting at this level of their inner circle feels out of the question. The truth is that over 40% of all those in a real estate transaction say they found their agent through a referral from a family member or a friend. If we close the door to the possibility of doing this business, it will only make everything else harder. Again, much of the work here is to restructure the stories we tell ourselves about what is and is not appropriate. Sometimes we need to address the image that we have for ourselves and the roles that we play within our family and our group of friends. Remember, our thoughts create our feelings, and our feelings dictate our actions. Ironically, if we fail to initiate sales conversations with these groups of people, we give up on one of the very best sources of strong leads. You know, people are much less likely to interview multiple agents if they got a referral and a strong endorsement from someone that they know, like, and trust. So we end up relegated to having sales conversations with the people who don't know us and don't trust us as well, which makes the lead conversion process that much harder. The last type of prospecting reluctance that I want to discuss today is the one that most of us think of when this topic comes up, and that is telephobia. In my experience, this term has kind of become a catch-all for many forms of reluctance, and yet it's very specific. And honestly, in my experience, it's pretty uncommon. The issue here is not the reluctance to self-promote. In many instances, the agent with telephobia is very comfortable initiating sales conversations in networking or in-person social settings. The challenge happens when trying to use the telephone for this purpose. In many cases, the phone itself has been linked to negative emotional experiences. You know, maybe you work from home and are bombarded all day by robocall after robocall and suddenly associate the phone with feelings of being annoyed. Or, in some circumstances, the person received some very upsetting or tragic news by phone in the past and made the association between the phone and these intense emotions. They may have no difficulty using the phone for non-emotional issues, like calling a friend or ordering a pizza. But when it comes to using the phone in a way that can trigger our emotions, which prospecting can easily do, the phone simply feels toxic. The work here is to break the pattern association between the act of using the phone for prospecting and the emotions that the phone itself trigger. And there's simple techniques that can be learned to recognize the pattern when it's beginning to unfold and redirect our emotional energy. You know, habits are nothing more than ingrained patterns of behavior. And when we interrupt the pattern by inserting a new action in the sequence, then telephobia gradually begins to loosen its grip over us. Now, we'll talk more about other types of prospecting reluctance next week. But before we wrap up for today, it's important to drive home one final important idea. Understanding your unique form of or combination of reluctance is important, but it's meaningless if it doesn't lead to an increased level of prospecting activity. Just as I defined the sales process earlier as facilitating decision-making and action, I see coaching as the process of facilitating understanding and action. If you're concerned that you might be experiencing prospecting reluctance to the degree that it's hurting your business, then reach out to me. I'll put my contact information in the video description below, along with a link to schedule a discovery call about taking the SPQ Gold Assessment. That's the first step in deciding what might specifically be holding you back. And once we know that, then we can put together a plan to get things back on track. Remember, there's no shame in experiencing any of these kinds of avoidance behaviors. Most agents do at some point in their career. But there's also no reason to let it stand in the way of the successful career that you want for yourself and the lifestyle that you deserve. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and drop a comment below. That really helps me by giving me feedback on what you're finding helpful and what you'd like to see. And subscribe below so that you'll be notified the next time a video gets posted to this channel. Until the next time, make it a great week, everyone. Embrace the journey.